Senator Rhiannon.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. The debate before us today is most important. Across Australia, hundreds and hundreds of sites have now been identified as contaminated with firefighting foam. The chemicals associated with that, known as PFOS and PFOA, have been identified with a range of health problems. And we're seeing a government that just is not managing it properly. The stress that I see from residents who are just uncertain of their future, have seen that their property values collapse, are just getting fobbed off by the government. Their stress that they're living with is extreme, and it's a real indictment of this government. We saw that last Tuesday when so many people were hoping that the government would come forward with a report that would give some certainty, but it's just added to the anger, the confusion and the stress. Now, these poisons, we just need to really understand what we're dealing with here, because I sometimes think that people just think, oh yes, another contamination. It's not another contamination. These are man-made, human-made chemicals that do not break down. They accumulate in the soil, the water, they bioaccumulate in the bodies of living organisms and in human beings. And the critical issue here to understand is that they do not break down. Why don't they break down? It's where human beings were too clever. When they made these chemicals, they made them in a way that their structure would stay in place even when it became soluble in water. And that needs to be understood to understand the enormity of this problem. These chemicals build up and up in our bodies. And I want to share with you something that my colleague, Senator Janet Rice, alerted me to. She went to the wonderful dinner that the ABC puts on for people involved in haywire. And this is a young man, Jared Sanson, from Newcastle. And I wanted to share with you some of his comments. It brings home the human side of what we're dealing with here. This young man was raised on one of the farms at Williamtown. They had 50 acres. He describes how wonderful his life was growing up with all the animals. And then they decided after a point that they had to leave their farm. This was before the contamination had been released. And he said that it was an upheaval for their family, leaving 100 years plus of family heritage behind. But they moved away. And then they found out the devastating news. Initially, they were so concerned about the neighbours that they had left behind, and these are Jared's words. The RAAF base had been using fire extinguishers since the 1950s that contained toxic chemicals. Over time, carcinogenic substances entered the town's drainage system, contaminating the water table. The health impact on our family has now come to light. My grandfather, along with three of his siblings, Valmay, Milton and Monty, all died of stomach cancer. Many of our old neighbours have been infected and fear the same fate. Mum, Dad, my siblings and I all ate fresh produce from gardens which thrived on the contaminated water. We all have to be tested, something we're putting off, not out of laziness, but worry. I don't feel angry at the RAAF base like many people do. I just feel devastated for those we left behind in the red zone. It simply breaks my heart the people we grew up with are at risk of cancer. Their homes are worth nothing. They can't even get a loan to do up a kitchen. I can't begin to describe how sorry I feel for people still in the red zone. Senator McGrath, Senator Patterson, everybody on the coalition benches need to take that on board. This is the reality. You can come forward here and quote people saying, well, the science isn't clear. There are so many cancer clusters in this area. And if you dig into the science, it is clear. It's very clear what is going on. And then there's the financial implications of the property value. How would any of us feel who own a home and then all of a sudden you find out that it's worthless because of contamination that you have nothing to do with? And in fact, there is another body, in this case the federal government, that admits total responsibility. But that doesn't mean anything for these people. What they're left with is picking up the pieces, trying to pick up the pieces of their life, because they can't get compensation, they can't get anybody to buy, they can't sell their property to anybody, and they can't get a settlement from the government. This has been dragging on for years. We got the Senate inquiry up into 2015. It's now 2018. One of the residents, who I've met a number of times, Lindsay Clout, he's from the Fullerton Cove Residents Action Group. He's also runs a small business in horticulture there. It's a beautiful the property, but it's now in the red zone. And this is what he said about last week's announcement. Senator McGrath has a hide to be going in and telling the banks everything is all right. Then those guys are looking at your newspaper, meaning the Newcastle Herald, and seeing 50 cancer cases on a 4-kilometre stretch. Again, that is a reality that these people are living with. And I make reference to his comments about the banks because that was something that was featured a part of Senator McGrath's report last week about the discussions that have been having with various finance institutions. And an Australian Bankers Association spokesperson said it was relying on the government to lead on the important issue and was assisting where possible. But again, when you read what's going on here, not that we're hearing everything that goes on behind closed doors, obviously, it's just like that spin that just turns people off governments and politics so much these days. And what this person said, the spokesperson said, he said residents in affected areas should contact their bank with any concerns they may have or if they are experiencing financial difficulties. These people have got so many stories. Senator McGrath, you must have heard them when you went to Williamtown yourself. It's one of the first things they raised with us. And these are the comments from the government that have so incensed residents. But they had feared that about the information that they might receive about the state of how the government is handling the situation. But I think it even shocked those who were not really expecting anything in terms of how the government has handled it. The Insurance Council of Australia has also been involved in this. And the issue has come up about the health consequences, to what degree that has been information has been relayed to the banks, and it really has been quite minimal. Now, the insurance, I'm aware that Campbell Fuller from the Insurance Council of Australia has said that they were made aware of the US EPA study in 2016. But then he goes on to say, he said that contamination had not had an effect on the availability or pricing of household insurance. Well, there's many examples where that's just not the case. There's the case of Ryan Baker, and he's been looking to get a business loan because his house is located, his house is located in the red zone, but he wanted a business loan so he could get on with his life. He can't get that loan. You know, these stories are repeated time and time again, and this is an issue now across Australia, where we're hearing more and more reports of this contamination. Gold Coast Airport, the Katherine situation, we've heard other speakers detail that. Like the reports there nominate that just about everybody in the town of Katherine has been impacted. I mean, this is seriously extraordinary, the depth of this poisoning that is going on. And you rely on a few crossbenchers to rattle the chains and really put this onto the agenda here. Sydney Airport's another one. Oakey in Queensland. It goes on and on the list. And then I have many firefighters who's contacted us who talk about how they undertook their training, and they're worried about themselves, they're worried about the area where they undertook this training with no proper safeguards in place. There's a report that cattle farmers in Queensland and New South Wales near the Oakey and Williamtown bases said they were concerned that they're selling contaminated meat. What they have told me is that they're told not to eat the meat, but they can sell the meat. I mean, this is a huge crisis. It's out of control. Like, how much is this going to be allowed to go on when it's not about saying that Liberal Nationals are to blame, the Labor's to blame? I mean, there's huge fault, and I think they're a blame for the immediate situation, but it's had this long-term history that now we should be all pulling together, saying the right thing will be done by the people and the right thing will be done in cleaning up these contaminated bases. Because of many things have shocked me in dealing with the Williamtown community. But one that really topped it was when I found out that they haven't stopped the contamination coming off the base. Now, that in this day and age is totally possible. Yes, it's hard to clean up this toxic pollution, but it can be stopped coming off the base. but the pollution is out there. It's getting into the water of the hunter. This is a disaster, and all parties should be working together.
Expired.